I want to share a touch of personal history about the two of you because it's interesting to our audience, I think. But when you were Attorney General and Henry had a previous life worked as a stock analyst, you actually, busted Henry. Is that a fair phrase, Henry? I don't know what you guys call it. Anyway, there were allegations made and prosecutions issued based on your extraction of email traffic, including emails from Henry. Is that correct?
As part of a much larger investigation.
But the point is, would you say, Henry, that the extraction of email made it more difficult?
Look, email is very important. My point would be that it's, and I think Eliot would agree, that it's one piece of the puzzle. And the problem with just releasing everything instantly is it doesn't give you a complete piece. It doesn't give you meetings, doesn't give you voicemails, doesn't give you other communications that happen. So it's one piece of the puzzle, and that's important. And I sure do want to know what happened at AIG. And not just in AIG, but with Tim Geithner, New York Fed, the bailout, lots more.
So how would this work?
Look, Henry is right, and that's why in the article we say, look, the Bear Stearns case that just ended, the folks were exonerated in part because of the emails. What we're saying is the emails are a piece, they're a critical piece. They will permit us to put the story together. The questions Henry just alluded to have been the ones for months now I've been pounding, and others as well. What was the relationship between AIG and Goldman, AIG and the Fed, AIG and Treasury? What was known bottom to top? These are critical questions that the taxpayer deserves to know, and we own the company. It's not as though we just need to know this and it's some company out there which we're not involved in. We own it. We deserve to know because our financial future depends upon it.
And if you look at the amount of money that moved through AIG from the taxpayer, again, billions come in. AIG, with the authorization of the current Treasury Secretary at the time was running the New York Federal Reserve, being Tim Geithner, authorizes the payment of 100 cents on the dollar to every contract that was had between the banks and AIG. And yet, why is there even resistance to getting more information?
It is hard for me to understand what the logical argument would be against letting the public see something that cost us $170 billion. And that is merely the fulcrum around which 100 other transactions occurred, thousands. And we deserve to understand what was going on in those markets as we're trying to figure out what the answer is.
What do you think they're hiding? What would they have to hide?
Back-channel conversations between Tim Geithner and AIG. What happened? The allegation is that AIG was trying to solve the problem on its own, going to Goldman, saying, take 60 cents. Suddenly, Tim Geithner charges in, says, don't worry, we'll make you completely whole. That is a huge problem. And people, to Eliot's point, we have to know what happened there, why that mistake was made, because I think it's universally viewed as a mistake.
Isn't the speculation that if the money, you needed a way to get money into Goldman Sachs and the other banks because absent them getting that money, that their own status as an ongoing enterprise was potentially threatened,
Dylan,
and so you do it through the back door.
This is one of the critical tensions out there. Goldman has been insisting we were solvent, we were stable, we didn't need the money. Tim Geithner, of all people, recently feeling a lot of heat, came out and said, no, you weren't. And so this is one of the critical questions. Did Goldman depend upon this infusion of capital to survive? If it did, it puts them in a whole different position at so many different levels in terms of salaries, what they do, regulatory status, and I think it reframes the entire debate and sheds light on how they've conducted their business.
Doesn't it also reframe our government's relationship with it, Henry?
Oh, it's critical to understand what happened. There's no question. My question for Eliot is, isn't this happening? I mean, you showed how good it can be to be a prosecutor digging into this. AIG is an outrage. Everybody's furious about it. Aren't there dozens of people looking into this?
But one part of this is temporal. Yes, there are people looking at this tiny little piece, and 5 years from now, maybe we'll get a case, maybe not. We need the answer now. The regulatory reframe is occurring right now. Do not permit one little prosecutorial office somewhere to have a monopoly on this. The notion of an open source investigation, the public owns the company. Let us all take a look at this. Excuse me. Take out the privileged documents, the private documents. We don't care about the salacious stuff, but let us see the financial transactions. Let everybody pour over it. We'll get the whole story immediately.
What is the resistance to doing this, and who wields the power to make this happen, and who wields the power to make it not happen?
The Treasury Department. The Treasury Department, the Treasury Department. They control the three people who are themselves on the committee that technically can direct the board of directors of AIG. So it goes from Treasury to the committee to the board of directors of AIG. We control that. Tim Geithner should be asked today, why don't you tell him to do it? Ben Bernanke, why don't you tell them to do it? Open it up right now. We need senators, members of Congress to carry this.
Is it a stretch to say this is in the White House? If it's the Treasury, is this not in the White House's hands? If the White House wanted to show the American people the documents as to how it is that AIG was able to perpetrate this fraud, they could direct the Treasury Department to do this. Is that correct?
That's my view of the law, absolutely.
You're nodding?
And if the argument is we had to do it or the world would have ended, that defense should still be in place after everything comes out.
That's right.
That under the sacred same circumstances, we do the same thing again.
Information is neutral. We just want the story.
Yep, I got it. Listen, gentlemen, thank you so much. Thanks to both of you, really, for having this conversation. Thank you, guys.